ando majimbara baritayao. Jano makabodara maniando majimbara baritayao.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me is my good brother here in the temple, the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadari Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
Zadari Enterprises would like to remind you that expecting people to go from PC back to console is a stupid idea, and that should not ever be your marketing strategy. Yes, I am dunking directly on PlayStation and on Sony.
Look, whenever a company makes a mistake, it is always a learning experience. And I know I keep using that line that's attributed to Napoleon, whether or not he actually said it is up for debate, but it keeps applying, so I'm going to keep using it. Never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And, as I've said elsewhere, the easiest way to avoid life's pitfalls is to watch other people fall in the holes. But we are not here to focus on holes. We are here because this week and the next few weeks, one shots notwithstanding, that we cover Gubat-Banwa, we're going to be covering the disciplines. I don't know why I said disciples of each of the major heritages, and it's not far removed from the way mechs are designed by different manufacturers in, say, Lancer, which we've already established was one of the big inspirations for this game. I will note, however, I am not the biggest fan of having disciplines moved all the way at the back end in the compendium. Mostly because like a lot of things are moved back there. But that's mainly my own little preference issue.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not the only game that's done this. I'm not a big fan of when a lot of this kind of material is moved all the way to the back. And it's not like it's a deal breaker, but it is a pet peeve of mine. And for those more familiar with more litigious role-playing games, disciplines would be the equivalent of classes, but saying that it's a one-to-one is not accurate. especially since as we're seeing so far, it'd be much easier to multi-class. But that being said, before we get to the Rajanate disciplines, we have to go into the formatting of disciplines. And
Yep.
really, this section itself should have been in the Kanduganon chapter, but I digress. So I'll let you open up with the fluff.
All right. Disciplines. Now let us speak of violence. Let the storms flurry and the leaves cut through. Anything can be a weapon, even your own heart, even you. Now, there's a sidebar here that says disciplines do not arise from nothingness. To learn a discipline's signature technique or to practice it, you must first have met with a master or another learned practitioner to do so. But, to continue the fluff, do you hear the sound of war gongs, conch shell horns, war trumpets, the cadence of an outrigger warship cutting through a river, the sheen glimmer of Damascened steel dipped deep in venoms of midnight pythons clanged against lacquered hardwood shields? That is the resonance of warriors. That is the song of war. The noise of martial arts. Tell me you hear it too, the ululation of uttered mantras from the mystic language summoning flames from fingertips. The roar of threats yelled from deep within inflamed hearts, wellsprings of passion and emotion. The dissonance of steel on steel, of sacred metal blades biting deep into muscle and viscera. That is the sound of martial artistry, the sound of combat, the sound of violence. Welcome, warrior, to Gubat-Banwa. You are a Kadunganon, honor-bound and gallant, beholden to passion, conviction, want, and obligation. Wield your violence like a blade, I think it's supposed to be ever summonable. Your martial art is known as your discipline. You see, okay, I'm not sure they're using that word correctly. You are an heir disciple. That is a contraction of ever. So if they mean it as what I think it's supposed to mean, it's you are ever a disciple. It should be transposed. Everyone is. There is no true master, you see. Disciplines are embedded deep into Gubat-Banwa's skein, and that skein isn't in a skein of yarn for all of you knitters and crocheters out there. It is the tapestry of its song, the martial arts that arise from each culture, each faction, each family, each clan. Some disciplines arrive from long-lived traditions, such as the Kawal. Others arise from the teachings of a singular warrior that has achieved certain enlightenment and has decided to teach it to those worthy, such as the Heaven Spear. Disciplines are martial arts. Each one has a long history embedded into the violence of the Sword Isles. Each one is made to inflict violence. Each one has ranks of teachers. Each one has hatreds and fellowships with other disciplines, though these are so intricate and specific to each individual that it would be a fool's errand to write them from a bird's eye view. Treat the disciplines with respect. They carry tradition and culture. Each discipline cannot be replaced, but they can be destroyed. Guard what is yours. This is your heart. Okay, this is not him dictating people to respect the culture. This is him speaking in universe to the Kadunganon, which makes a lot more sense. I like this style of writing. The discipline you are currently practicing is known as your active discipline. You are immersed into your active discipline, gaining its philosophy and inflict violence. Each discipline has 5 styles, categorized by some sword scholars obsessed with categorization. We have raiders, which are the damage dealers from up close and are made to rush across the battlefield. Sharpshooters, which are ranged attackers benefiting from keeping away from their targets as well as targeting large swathes of the battlefield. Sentinels, which are defenders, stewards of their allies. They're meant to take hits and get stronger as they do so. They often have catch-22 mechanics wherein they enforce hard decisions upon the victims of their scorn. Monk, it's a category that forces risk or reward on other people. Witches, which inflict ailments upon their targets, hamstringing and hobbling and weakening them. Often, they're also masters of forced movement, area denial, and manipulating the battlefield directly. Mediums, which grant support and blessings to their allies, keeping them alive and multiplying their effectiveness.
Also, thank you, Lind Yin, for joining the temple. I hope you enjoy what we do here.
The styles are loose categories. Everything in the Sword Isles chooses to defy categorization. Use these as aligning tools, not as hard rolls. All styles do damage in one way or another. It's trying to say that there's a focus, but everything can kill good. I like that.
Mm-hmm. So, I also like that we have a bit of a color coding, and these styles do remind me of the 4 roles from 4E. I'd say raiders would probably be the equivalent of strikers. Sharpshooters would also be strikers. The striker role back then didn't really discriminate between melee and ranged. Sentinel is defender. And I'd say witches would be akin to controller. Debuffing is one half of the controller role. The other is wide angle or AoE options. And mediums would be the equivalent of leaders. Leaders usually have some sort of party support, not necessarily heal botting, but some form of support. Because after all, the warlord is a leader type, and he's not doing any healing. He's doing I'm giving you more options to beat them. But right after that, we have the discipline attributes. Each discipline has innate attributes that define how their ability in the battlefield. I don't like how that sentence is written.
The word "how" should not be there.
Yeah.
It should just be defining their abilities in the battlefield.
These being philosophy, pause, speed, and jump.
I think that's position, speed, and jump, maybe.
Probably. Additionally, they also have bonuses to prowesses. Then we have philosophy. Each discipline has philosophies that exemplify the most important parts of their art. Philosophies grant you the ability to spend thunderbolts to perform powerful effects across the battlefield. You take on the philosophies of your active discipline. Inflict violences. Each discipline has its own violences, which they practice with the weapons they favor. You can only perform the inflict violences of your active discipline. And signature techniques. Each discipline has four signature techniques, which have to be learned in order from 1 to 4. These are their most effective and most popular techniques. You cannot use the same signature technique twice per riff. And then enlightenment. Each discipline has an enlightenment which you unlock after gaining their second signature technique. These are realizations of violence. They grant powerful passive effects that can change how you play a discipline. Once you have an enlightenment, you have it unlocked, and you can equip it even if you have a different active discipline. However, you can only equip one enlightenment at a time. Then liberation. Finally, the most powerful realization and technique of a discipline is their realization, their most significant attack. Once you've learned all the techniques of a discipline, you gain access to that discipline's liberation. All at once a revolution, you can only equip one liberation at a time, and once you use them, you cannot use them again until you go into downtime. Each liberation has 3 levels. Level 1 costs 5 thunderbolts, level 2 costs 7, and level 3 costs 9. This means the higher ranks of the higher levels of liberation you can only use at higher ranks. I hope it's not a case where if you use one of the 3 types of liberations, then the other 2 are cut off from you until downtime.
I don't know. That could be read either way.
Mm-hmm.
But from what it sounds like, the liberations are uber moves.
Especially since you're spending thunderbolts, and thunderbolts don't come cheap.
Yeah. There's also a technique reading format.
Mm-hmm. Though
Um,
before you get to that, I do want to cover the mindfulness sidebar.
okay.
As Gubat-Banwa is a constantly moving game with multiple mechanics, everyone in the battlefield should carry their weight. This makes playing the game more involved and fun across the board. In general, you should keep track of your own mechanics. It's how you have fun and stay engaged. Raiders should track their damage bonuses and flanking. Sharpshooters should track their elevation bonuses, merit sources, and range counting. Sentinels should track their reactions and taunts. Witches should track their afflictions. Mediums should track the blessings they grant and the bonuses they give. And then we have technique format. Sorry to cut you off, but I wanted to take care of that first.
It's okay. Um, the block that it shows and gives, because every discipline has four signature techniques that four levels of or four signature techniques we'll be looking at, and then the enlightenments and the liberations. It shows all four levels of a tech, or all the Roman numerals that represent the levels of a technique. Then it says technique name. In this example, they're using Bleeding Steel Monsoon. They say that there's usually a section of lore or fiction, or as many Magic the Gathering players will know it, flavor text.
Or as we've called this kind of thing, fluff.
Yeah. It has a cost and the mantras necessary to use the technique. It says this will state the necessary beat cost of the technique if it's a break or reverb and any other additional mantras. It'll also talk about the target and the actual type of attack, melee, ranged, or area attack. It also says that the formula for how the attack will be used and what violence die is used. And then it says plus prowess versus a specific damage. The example that they have here is violence dice plus. So this is actually kind of how we've done parts of skill defenses, Monk. Kind of.
Although this dice versus this X versus Y thing, that was pretty much how all the powers were set up back in 4E.
Yeah, we can definitely see the DNA. But then it says any special effects and any special considerations about the technique will be written there. There will be a psalm where there's a short lore blurb about the technique itself. Such as how it was developed or whatever. So there's two different types of fluff here. One is the fiction, such as what the technique makes you feel. The example they give is, unbidden you suddenly strike, performing a lightning-fast combination that rends your opponent. When fully committed to this technique, you exhale heaven smoke from your nose and launch into attacks so fast that you are wreathed in blood.
Yep.
Whereas the psalm is more the background of the move. I don't know exactly how many of these we'll go into detail with. We don't usually go into detail over technique or spell lists, but it depends on what the disciplines themselves look like, I suppose.
Yeah. So now there's not a lot. There's not going to be a lot of disciplines. In fact, each heritage only has 5 disciplines. And I double checked. Yep, it's 5 for each. So the first one that we have is the Buwaya Lancer. Lord of the Seas, Friends of the Revered, unstoppable juggernauts of lakes and rivers. The style is Sentinel, complexity is average. That reminds me, one of these days we should go back and look at and rate the jobs that we have on complexity level. I.e., the whole out of 3 stars difficulty you see with some games.
I don't want to do that. I don't think that that's fun.
But
I'm gonna be honest.
The Buwaya Lancers are essentially crocodile cavalry. You've got a spear, usually armed with a spear and shield, and are riding a crocodile. The discipline philosophy is Crocodile Knight. Gain a Thunderbolt when you start your riff and there is at least one enemy adjacent to you. You have a layer that is every tile adjacent to you. Moving out of the layer costs +1 speed. As long as you have Thunderbolts, all enemies adjacent to you suffer demerit on all attacks that don't include you as a target. And then we have 3 further effects. Grappling Dragon. When a fighter moves out of your lair, spend a Thunderbolt before they leave your lair to inflict violence against them. If the violence deals damage to them, they lose all their movement at the end of that and end that movement.
It's an attack of opportunity that stops them from moving out of your range.
Yep. Dragon Rage. At the start or end of your riff, you may spend Thunderbolt to deal D10 damage to all enemies in your lair and then taunt them until the end of your next riff. If they're already taunted, deal an additional +D4 damage to them. And Makara Presence. At the start of any fighter's riff, if they're within burst 4 of you, you may spend a Thunderbolt to pull them 3 tiles. We probably won't know what... I have a guess as far as what burst is, but we won't get into details until we get to the violence chapter. The discipline attributes, position 30, speed 4, jump 1, evade 0, and a couple of bonuses. The preferred weapons are tridents, harpoons, fishing rods, and shields. The armors are tattoos, cotton-padded armor, silk jackets, bronze breastplate, or long flowing cloaks. The inflict violence is Dragon Guards the Rivers. First with Draconic Clash, which deals D8 base damage plus D2 for each enemy adjacent to you. Harpoon is the poke, and fishing rod is the pull. Their enlightenment is Gods Revel in Rivers. You gain 2 breaks outside of your riff instead of just 1. You are resistant against water attacks. Their liberation is Kalamakara Sequence. I probably mispronounced that. Level 1, Makara Summons. You get is a burst 5 pull. So I think burst is meant to be AoE centered on you.
Yeah. That's what it sounds like to me.
Level 2 is Makara Aspect, where you become size 2, ignore all terrain, gain regenerating, get plus D6 on all defenses, and all your attacks ignore par. And level 3 is Kalamakara Lawas. Become Kalamakara, the sea monster that will consume the entire world named Time. You become size 3. When an enemy starts their riff, you may pull them up to 2 tiles. Leaving your adjacency costs 1 speed. All your attacks against enemies adjacent to you deal D12 damage. This is definitely the tank, but this is the tank in the way the 4E fighter was the tank of, you're not going anywhere. Then signature techniques. The four of them are Dragon Lashes Out, which if you deal damage, you can force a target to stop their movement when they try and get out of there. Dragon Seizes the Sky, which inflicts slow, and if they're already taunted, you can force slide them. Dragon Layer Pamagi, which is a close AoE. Bring all tiles in burst 1. No, it's not an AoE, it's a fuck your terrain, because you bring all tiles in burst 1 down by -2 elevation.
I went ahead and looked up the names for the abbreviations we've been seeing. POS is posture. FER is ferocity, SPI is spirit, PAR is parry, and RES is resilience.
Which definitely makes sense. So I'll probably need you to correct me on that as we go forward.
Yeah.
But the fourth signature technique is Buaya Karakoa.
You love these names.
Which is a case of moving and bringing the adjacent fight with you, which is reminding me of the Field Knight from Veil of the Void. Then we have the Kowal. And I'll let you take that one.
The Kowal. Give me just a second. Masters of the Eight Direction Guardian, disciples of the Lakapati, protectors of the worlds, not king, or protectors of the world, not kings. They're a sentinel. Their complexity is easy. They wield a big fuck off shield and a big fuck off spear, apparently, according to the art. Guardians of the Eight Directions, which is one of those fun references to Eastern mythoses that it's fun to see the Eight Directions even in Southeast Asian areas. Let's put it that way. But one of the cool things here in the beginning lore says the shield is a symbol of strength. It's really nice. So their discipline philosophy, again, is the Eight Directions Guardian. When you suffer damage from an enemy, gain a Thunderbolt afterwards. While you have Thunderbolts, whenever you attack an enemy, taunt them until the end of your next riff. They have 3 additional fun little philosophy moves as well. Dragon Guard. When an ally moves or is moved out of adjacency of you, you may spend a Thunderbolt to move up to your speed with them, keeping adjacency as much as possible. Royal Lance. When an enemy moves or is moved out of an adjacent tile of you, you may spend a Thunderbolt to deal D10 damage to them before they move. If they are taunted or marked, the movement is stopped immediately. So they have a way of AOO and stopping people as well, but the taunt has to be in effect. Indomitable Shield. When you are forcibly moved, you may spend a Thunderbolt to become immune against that forced movement. Their discipline attributes are posture of 24, speed of 4, jump of 1, evade of 1, and they gain a +2 bonus to parry. Their weapons are treasured spears, barongs, giant panabas, kalasag, taming, spiked shields, giant campulons. Their armors are war hats, buffalo cuirasses, bamboo leg plates, plated tassets, lamellars, wooden sandals. There's a nice little fun thing in the ancient days of Ancient of Days. I think that means ancient days. The Guardians of the Eight Directions come together and taught their art to mortals because they had foreseen that they would need their help to defend the world. Thus was the eight-direction guardian art born, which practices and perfects the manifestation of the Lakapati, the combined form of the eight guardian gods. Their inflict violence is Lokapala shields. First, they have a shield charge, which is D8 ferocity versus parry, and it also may push one the target and then move one tile toward the tile they vacated. Basically, you hit them with your shield, they move one tile away, you move into the tile they were in.
Mm-hmm.
It has shield bash, D6 ferocity versus resilience. Push the target one tile, then gain D6 block. And skewer, target is one fighter in a range of 1 to 2 because you're wielding a spear instead of one adjacent fighter like the previous two. D8 ferocity plus parry, and the effect also has if the target is taunted, inflicts slowed. Their enlightenment is Gaja Sankra's meditation. When you suffer a melee attack, you may counter-strike afterwards. Deal D10 damage against the target once per riff. At the end of your riff, choose one of the 8 directions that you're blocking against. Whenever you suffer an attack from that direction, add a D6 to your defense attempt. Their liberation has 3 levels, as they all do, called Rudrakasha's Bulu. First one is a mortal challenge. Essentially, you declare a duel to the death on someone within range 1 to 3. Until the end of violence, you and your Bulu can only consider each other as valid targets for each other's attacks, and you cannot deal damage to anyone else but each other. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's nice. Level 2, you still declare the Bulu. Mm-hmm. You and your target may immediately move 3 tiles, tumbling. If you become adjacent to each other, you may inflict violence against them with +3 merit and then stun the target. And then, of course, the same effects as the first level apply. And then Perfection of Lokapala. Inflict Bulu as with the previous level. On top of that, all enemies in the battlefield become challenged to you as well until the end of violence. When a fighter you've challenged makes an attack that doesn't include you as a target, stun and deal ferocity damage against them. Their 4 signature techniques are level 1, Roaring Storm Challenge. You target all enemies in burst 2, and you taunt all targets in the burst until the end of your next riff. We have the Raya Saiwa Challenges the Sun. All enemies in burst 2, you pull them 1 tile, and then you do an area attack of D6 ferocity plus parry. And if any target is already taunted, it deals D10 plus ferocity instead. And the effect also taunts all enemies until the end of your next riff. We have the Lotus Blossoming Hammer, which targets one adjacent enemy, D6 ferocity plus parry, or plus ferocity versus parry. You inflict dazed on the target. If they're already dazed, you inflict stunned. And then you have Bakunawa Consumes the Moon, which is considered a break, and its trigger is you are attacked. So this is a counter attack, a break in the riff, essentially a reaction, I think. Mm-hmm. Before you suffer the targeting attack, roll D8 plus parry. If the final result is equal to or higher than the attacker's total damage, then you become immune to the attack. Otherwise, have the target's total damage. That's fucking cool.
Yep. So both of them are sentinels, but I'd say the Kowal is far more focused on. I'd say the Kowal is a borderline striker with the whole dueling mechanic. I'd say they're probably the closest thing we'd see to the standard to the sword and board kind of fighter, but the art has them doing poke and board technically.
Well, I mean their treasure, their weapons are spears and other long arms.
Mm-hmm. But what I mean by that is that they're more focused on singling out a single target as opposed to the crowd control that the Lancer is doing.
Mm-hmm. You're gonna have trouble with this next name.
Then we have the Manana Yao.
Nope.
Yeah, I knew that was bad.
Mangangang Yao. It's Manganga Yao there. Manganga Yao.
Mm-mm.
It's a fun name.
Yep. The
We're gonna butcher it. I'm sorry.
The Demon Sword Raiders of the Endless Seas, Bane of Empires, Caesar of Heaven's Thunderclaps, Peerless Blade Masters of Sea and Sky. They have a raider style. Complexity is easy. And I'm going to try my best not to compare them to pirates, but
The very first sentence is warriors who master the scallywag art of sea raiding. They're pirates.
yeah. Disciplined philosophy is relentless tide. When you make your second or beyond attack in a riff, gain a thunderbolt before making that attack. When you make a melee attack, you may spend any number of thunderbolts afterwards to multi-strike that many times. Multi-strike, you deal an extra 2 damage. A Mangang Yao. I think I got closer that time.
You did get closer. You just missed a single syllable. That's all.
Yeah. Must always be showing off unless they die. Or else they die. No, really. If a Sea Raider slows down, they will be consumed by the waves of war, and so they must keep moving so that they are above water. They are born into violence. They are the purest manifestations of strength, vigor, and ferocity. Their swords are always ready. Nothing can ever catch them off guard. They are the peerless warriors of the Sword Owls. All will fall to their blades.
Fun.
Let's see. Now, as far as the abbreviation, the Big Four, as far as abbreviation, what did you say that was again?
Positioning, speed, jump, evade.
Mm-hmm. So position is 20, speed is 5, jump is 2, evade is 2.
And fur is ferocity.
Mm-hmm. A +2 to ferocity.
Yep.
The inflict violence is dance along bloodied waves. The first move is 2 like the lightning. Targets one adjacent fighter. Does D8 plus ferocity versus
Parry.
Before or after the attack, you may move 1 tumbling.
I think it's mentioning tumbling because I think tumbling can go through occupied squares, or maybe tumbling doesn't inflict an AOO or something. I don't know.
I'm thinking. Tumble was a skill back in third where you could use that to move without provoking AOOs. It was really dumb to have that as a skill with the skill points set up from those days, but I think that's what's the intent here.
We'll find out more when we dive into the violence chapters.
Mm-hmm. So then is Between Thunders. Targets one adjacent fighter, inflict wide open on the target, and then move 2, tumbling. If they're already wide open, gain a thunderbolt, and then remove wide open. And kill the storm. Unleash. The target is one adjacent fighter. Deals D8 or D12 if the target is staggered, plus ferocity versus parry.
I wonder if wide open is the path to inflicting staggered. Other than from what I read, briefly looking at looking at posture.
Mm-hmm.
Staggered is when you have damage equal to half your posture value or higher. So.
Yep. The Enlightenment is whirlpool movement. You now ignore shallow water and difficult terrain. When you trigger a chain, you smirk afterwards until after you suffer damage. While smirking, your evade rises by +1. You add +1 to all your violence rolls. When you would defend a melee attack with parry, you can choose to forego defenses and deal 2d6 damage back at the attacker instead. Sick and tired of humility. Flex your ability. Laugh at them. Smirk at them. Every move you've done so far was a finishing blow. You just wanted to play with them.
Yeah, that sounds like a pirate to me.
Liberation is Pangya Ya.
Panga Yao.
Panga Yao.
Probably. Since it was Yao for the name as well.
Targets one adjacent fighter. It is a melee attack that does 3d8 plus ferocity versus parry. You may fly up to your speed before or after the attack. Any damage that overflows from the main target can be moved to another target in range. If that damage overflows as well, move that damage to another target, and so on. It's a flying cleave.
Yep.
Then the level 2 enlightenment is Pangya Sa Kragtan.
Pangya Yao Sa Karagatan. There you go.
Yep. Targets one adjacent fighter, does ferocity D8 plus ferocity versus parry. That's an interesting way to double up on ferocity.
Well, it means that whatever your ferocity value is the number of D8 you're rolling. And considering that you're playing a discipline that is meant to be about killing things, if your ferocity's high, this is going to be very nice. The discipline also gives you +2 ferocity as a bonus, so...
Yeah. All allies in the battlefield may fly 3 tiles.
I'm assuming that by using the term fly, they mean this ignores all terrain effects.
Then Pangya Yao
Sa Kali Bhutan.
Targets one adjacent fighter. This is a melee attack that deals ferocity D12 plus ferocity versus parry. If the target is not yet defeated after the attack, repeat the attack, ignoring combo breaker. If the target is defeated by the attack, all allies in the battlefield may move their speed, tumbling.
I have a question about that melee attack section there. If the target is not yet defeated after the attack, repeat the attack, ignoring combo breaker. Does this just continue to occur until they're defeated?
Given that it's the level 3 liberation and how many thunderbolts you have to spend, I could see it.
I don't see a limit named. I wonder if it's only supposed to be 1 and then 2 and then you're done. Or if it's just let's keep doing this until whatever you're hitting is dead.
I think it's you're doing it twice.
I think that's probably the intent, but that might want to be baked into the move because, as I just demonstrated, having forwarded countless rules lawyers myself, and also having been a shitty rules lawyer when I was a little kid that was that guy. Everybody's that guy at least one time in their lives. Nobody can deny that.
But then I
can easily just say, oh yeah, it doesn't have a limit. I'm just going to keep doing this.
Which is certainly a move. But then we have these signature techniques. First being Bleeding Steel Monsoon. Targets one adjacent fighter, does D8 damage versus parry, ignore combo breaker. And we have Flurry, spend another beat to repeat the attack, then become debilitated afterwards. Then we have Killing Blow Stance. You take on the Killing Blow Stance until you make a melee attack. The stance says the attack that ends Killing Blow Stance is imbued with +2 merit, relentless, +D4 damage, and ignores combo breaker.
Man, a lot of that stuff is going to be explained in the violence chapters.
There's going to be a lot of put a pin on that until we get to violence. Third is 10,000 Vermilion Death Blows.
I like that.
It's 2 beats. Targets one adjacent fighter. Deals D4 plus ferocity versus parry. Keep repeating this attack against the same target, ignoring combo breaker, until it is evaded or you make 3 total attacks.
Okay, see, there's a limit named in this one. There's no limit named in Panga Yao Sakali Bhutan. So I almost think that since there isn't a limit named, that does mean just keep doing it until they're dead.
And the fourth is Live Hand, which is a break, so it's a counter. Trigger is an enemy adjacent to you attacks you. Targets the triggering enemy. Effect is inflict violence against the target before they make their attack.
It's an interrupt. Also, the final effect of 10,000 Vermilion Death Blows. Sorry for interrupting and disrupting your track there, Monk. Is you become wide open after the final attack.
So
next, we have the first discipline that doesn't have a name that I'm sure we're butchering. The Sword Poet. But then immediately has a phrase that I'm pretty sure I'm going to butcher. Ong Sudong Balaknon, Master of Song and Sword, Protector of the Living World, Preserver through Epic and Poetry, Bearers of the Holy Word of Rhythm. Why does this just... Monk, why does this just sound like I'm playing someone from Jet Set Radio Future?
I mean...
Style... Or maybe we're playing Hi-Fi Rush now. Maybe we're playing Hi-Fi Rush. Maybe that's what we're doing now.
Yep.
As it is, their style is Sentinel. So we've had 3 Sentinels and 1 Raider here. But the complexity for the Sword Poet is complex. Meaning that it's probably the highest complexity then, right? Is it complexity easy and complexity average, I think?
The Lancer was easy. The Lancer was average. The Kowal was...
The Kowal was easy. And the Manganga Yao was also easy on complexity, if not on naming. I love some of the fluff here in that first sheet. It's really nice. But the discipline philosophy is called Flower Tongue. Your love extends beyond. When an enemy you have taunted makes an attack, you gain a Thunderbolt after their attack resolves. When an enemy taunted by you makes a melee attack against you, deal D8 damage against them before they make the attack. Then there are the 3 philosophy moves. Degrading Mockery. Spend a Thunderbolt at the start or end of a rift to inflict D10 damage against all enemies you have taunted. That's just a better version of Vicious Mockery. Resonant Advance. When an enemy makes an attack, spend a Thunderbolt to move 2 and give all allies in burst 2 of you block D6 before the enemy attacks. So you get to move 2. All the allies within 2 spaces of you get block D6, and then the enemy gets to make their attack roll. Fun. Wings of Love. When an enemy within burst 3 makes an attack that does not include you as a target, spend a Thunderbolt to fly to a tile adjacent to them and make a melee attack using D12 plus Spirit versus Parry against them before they attack. Monk, it's cover. It's fucking cover. Before we get into the inflict violence, the discipline attributes are a posture of 22, a speed of 4, a jump of 1, an evade of 2. They get a bonus of +1 spirit and +1 parry. Their weapons that they like are bell swords, kudyapi, which are boat lutes, korlong, bamboo zithers, bamboo flutes, jaw harps, nose flutes, chopping blades, and bell maces. Their armors are long robes, cloaks, head wraps, breastplates, wooden sandals, lamellars, rainbow gowns, foot wraps, sapin, which are silk socks, and brocaded sarongs. So they wield both traditional weapons and instruments, and they like to look pretty while fighting. I like this. This is the whole game has been described in terms of beats and rhythm and the rhythm of violence. This guy is very clearly one of those people super in tune with that rhythm, making him. I know people are going to make the comparison that this is the bard. I'm going to tell you you're fucking wrong, and that every character is in their own way a bard of violence. But
this is just less troubadour and more scald. No,
less troubadour and much more. No, this is Skald, Monk, because Skald were some of the most ferocious fighters too. They were there to collect the stories as they were happening on the battlefield. A Skald usually told stories they themselves had witnessed alongside the histories of the peoples. And then the inflict violence is literally Song of Blood. Targets one adjacent fighter, does D8 plus spirit versus resilience, and you taunt. What? You taunt the target indefinitely. I hit you with Mocking Sword, you better be attacking me for the rest of the fucking violence, is essentially what this says. Sword Ambahan. All enemies in Burst 1 does D4, D8 if the target is taunted, plus Spirit versus Resilience. And then Annoy. One enemy within range 1 to 3 inflicts D6 damage and confused on the target. It hurt itself in its confusion, Monk. Oh my god. The Enlightenment is called Sword Rhetoric. 1/resound. When an enemy in Burst 2 makes an attack that does not include you as a target, you may immediately move 2 tiles and then inflict violence beforehand. If this inflict violence is an attack, that attack gains +1 to their violence roll. So this is basic. So Sword Rhetoric is basically Wings of Love, except it's a little more versatile because it can use your inflict violences instead.
Mm-hmm.
It also doesn't seem to there's a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the side notes here. Dasiglang Gihapon. Keep going, the sword is still a sword. Cut yourself off with that sorrowful song. Maybe then, there will be peace. But not yet. Not yet. I goddamn, if there's a lot of artistry here. But the liberation is called Sidesa Gubat.
Mm-hmm.
Level 1, you do D12 plus spirit versus resistance. Each target gains a blade song on their heart until the end of violence. And that blade song is... and this is targets all enemies within Burst 3, I should say. And the blade song is, every time a fighter with a blade song makes an attack, they suffer your spirit in damage and heal you 2. As in the number 2.
Okay.
Okay. Level 2 is all enemies in the battlefield. 2d12 plus spirit versus resistance. Each target still gets the blade song on their heart until the end of violence. And that blade song is the same. Every time a fighter with the blade song makes an attack, they suffer your spirit and damage, and you get 2 healing. Level 1 is just called Blade Song. Level 2 is called Blade Kulintong. Level 3 is Pina Kakus Gong Sudong Side. I think I got that right. I as right as I'm going to be able to get it without actually speaking Cebuano. Once again, the target is all enemies. It does 3d12 plus spirit versus resistance. The effect is each target is skewered through with a sword poem until the end of violence. Now it's no longer a blade song, it's a sword poem. And the sword poem is when a fighter with a sword poem makes an attack, you... Motherfucker! Motherfucker! We can't get away from him! It's Cold Steel the Hedgehog returning from the dead, everybody! When a fighter with a sword poem makes an attack, you may teleport to a tile adjacent to them and then inflict violence before they attack. Nothing personnel, kid! Fuck!
You know, looking at the way the Wings of Love feature was set up, we
should have seen this coming.
Yes. But
to
then
quote a really good song from a really good musical, we had it coming. But we get to the signature techniques. Level 1, Poem of Swords and Spears. Targets all enemies in burst 1. Does D4 plus spirit versus resilience. Excuse me. Keep wanting to say resistance, but it's resilience. The effect marks all enemies in the burst until the end of your next riff, and while marked, all enemies deal minus D4 damage on all attacks that don't include you as a target. This can bring the damage to 0. Nice! Then we have the Naga Garuda Blade Poem. It's level 2. It's 1 enemy in range 3. Fly 2 towards the target. If you end in an adjacent... I assume they meant the word tile. It's not there. Perform the following melee attack. Melee D8 plus spirit versus resilience. Effect, inflict confused on the target, then throw them 3 tiles away. So... you fly towards them, inflict them with confuse, and then throw them away. You're like, fuck you!
Mm-hmm.
We have the... level 3 is the Water Lily Blade Song. Targets 1 adjacent enemy, does D8 plus spirit versus resilience. All allies, including you, in a burst of the target, in burst 2 of the target, so in burst 2 of the person you're hitting, get regenerating. I hit you and now everybody's healing, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a sentinel. This is like... I don't know what to call this anymore. You're not just protecting. You're doing fucking everything here.
Oh.
And then Hope and Dreams Blade Poem. If John were here, I know that he'd be hearing a certain song in his head. An enemy... it's a break... That's an attack, but there's also a wind or a wind. I'm not sure. Oh, no, the wind is the element. Mm-hmm. It's a break that's also an attack. So the trigger is an enemy in burst 3 of you makes an attack that doesn't include you. The target is the triggering enemy. The melee attack is D12 plus spirit versus resilience. You make this attack before the target makes their attack. And then you throw the target up to spirit tiles away. Taunt the target until the end of your next riff. So this level 4 signature technique is, you're trying to hit my friend? Go that way, and then you have to come at me.
Yep. So the last one of the 5 here is the Warrior Balyan. Exorcists, priests, shamans, healers, and channelers of the myriad gods of violence, which fills our world and then overflows. Style is medium. Complexity is very complex. Also, I love the art here with all of its little friends, including the guy at the bottom.
You know who that is, right? You know what that is, at least.
What?
You've played Animal Crossing before, haven't you?
Yeah, a couple of them.
So you remember all the little dudes?
Mm-hmm.
It's those things.
Yeah. But their discipline attributes are position 22, speed 4, jump 2, evade 1. They gain a +1 bonus to resilience and spirit. Their discipline philosophy is Dinatian. When you give an ally a blessing, gain a thunderbolt. You have a size 1 spirit guide ally that begins violence adjacent to you, lasting until you dismiss with 1 beat or you are defeated. The spirit guide can be targeted, and it shares your parry and resilience. The spirit guide has position equal to 1/4 of your max position, rounded up. If it hits 0 HP, they are removed from the battlefield. If the spirit guide suffers damage, split the damage between yourself and the spirit guide. If your spirit guide is removed from the battlefield, you can spend 1 beat to summon them from anywhere within burst 10. All allies adjacent to the spirit guide have merit on all attacks. Additionally, you may choose your spirit guide as the origin point of a technique's effect or an attack. And the further options are Chant. You can spend a Thunderbolt when an ally starts their riff within burst 2 of you, or your spirit guide to give them +1 to all attacks and their speed until the end of the next riff. Benefic. When you give an ally a blessing, spend a Thunderbolt to heal them spirit afterwards. And
that name, Benefic, is stolen directly from Final Fantasy XIV. Good job.
Senib. At the start of an ally's rift, you may spend a Thunderbolt to make the spirit guide possess that ally if they're within burst 3 of that ally. The spirit guide shares the target's tile and moves with them. The possessed fighter gains +1d4 to all damage and defenses. Possession ends with the spirit guide is summoned back to the battlefield.
Wow.
And then we have their Inflict Violence, Xenoglossy. So first is Warrior Guidance. Targets an ally adjacent to the spirit, including yourself. The target may inflict violence with +1 to the violence die. Then we have Spirit Dance, +1 beat. So not +1 beat. Target is your spirit guide. Teleport the spirit guide up to 4 tiles. If they're not in the battlefield, summon them to any tile within burst 4. Then Ritual Spear Strike. Targets one enemy in range 1 to 2. Attack is D8 plus Spirit versus Resolve. Not Resolve, Resilience. Sorry. You or all allies in burst 2 gain Protect.
Fun.
Let's see. Then the Enlightenment.
Well, before you go there, Monk, the discipline attributes and everything.
I already read the discipline attributes.
Did you?
Yes.
I feel like you didn't.
No, I did.
What about the weapons and armor?
Weapons is ritual staves, spears, wreaths.
That's why I didn't think you did.
Bundles of blessed grass, incense, tattooed hands, vajras, monk staffs, bells, ritual knives.
There's quite a few things that appeal to both of us there.
Mm-hmm.
Those who don't understand bundles of blessed grass, you've never seen anything from Asia, Eastern Asia in general, when it comes to religious, I guess, ceremony.
Yeah,
okay,
we can go with that.
I mean, I'm being very general because there's different ways it can be referred to depending on what part of East Asia you're in.
Yep.
And we're in Southeast Asia, technically, with this game.
But armor is multicolored robes, grieving raiments, cloaks, capes, golden sandals, flower diadems, breastplates, ritual war jackets, lamellars inlaid with gold trinkets, oversized gold ornaments, and brocaded sarongs.
Yay.
So, then we have the Enlightenment, Taruk Sa Gubat. You can now take up to 2 stances at a time. Whenever you take on or leave a stance, you perform a ritual dance. Heal D6 plus Spirit all allies in burst 2. When you gain a 3rd stance, choose one of the previous stances you leave. And then we have their Liberation, Glory. Level 1 is minor glory. Target is self. You attain temporary glory until the end of violence. Temporary glory, you cleanse all afflictions and become immune to all afflictions, and you have all damage you suffer. Level 2 is glorious install. Target is you and all allies in the battlefield. Heal the target D6 plus your spirit plus your resilience. Then they attain temporary glory until the end of the violence. And level 3 is Blossom Soul. Targets you and all allies in the battlefield. Your target attains Bulak-Diwa until the end of violence. Bulak-Diwa, you cleanse all afflictions and become immune to all afflictions, and you become immune to all damage. However, you cannot deal damage either. All allies in the battlefield gain regeneration, strengthened, protect, and add plus D8 to all their attacks and defenses. Any healing that brings you past your max position posture instead heals all allies in the battlefield. This will change your outlook on violence forever, change your conviction after the fight.
So the level 3 liberation is part stillness from the Spirit Master and Bravely Default 1, and part max boost to everybody else. Because it cleanses you, meaning the caster, of all afflictions. You become immune to afflictions, you become immune to damage, and you can't deal damage. All your allies get a bunch of stuff. And it changes your conviction after the fight? Okay. I might not force that one, just to be honest.
Especially since having someone come up with a brand new conviction on the spot might be, well, putting them on the spot.
Indeed.
Then we have the signature techniques. First is Purification Ritual. Targets you and all allies in burst 2.
I'd like to point out that earlier we heard a talk of stances when it came to the Enlightenment. All of the signature techniques for the Warrior Bullion are stances. They all say one beaten stance in every one of them.
Yep.
At the very least.
So you and all allies in burst 2. Cleanse one affliction on the target, then take on the Purifying Stance until the end of your next riff. Purifying Stance. While in this stance, you and all allies in burst 2 become immune to any incoming afflictions. Any demon, dead, or pale fighter that starts their riff within the burst suffers 3 plus your rank true damage. If this defeats them, they are exorcised immediately.
True damage bypasses all defenses. Oh man, we see that in a bunch of games that we love.
Second is Invincible Sword Raider Dance.
Ooh.
This is another stance. Target itself, give yourself and all allies within burst 3 strengthened. Then take on the Invincible Sword Raider stance until you suffer an attack. That stance has all allies in burst 3 of you gain merit to all of their attacks. When the stance ends, you may inflict violence if possible. So you're buffing your allies' attacks, and when the stance is over, you can follow up with your own attacks.
Yeah. Good shit.
3 is Thundering Vanquishing Raja Dance. This is another stance. Change the weather to raining if you wish. If not, instead grant all allies in burst 3 floating. Then take on the Thundering Vanquishing Raja stance until you make an attack. The effect of that stance, all allies that start their riff within burst 5 of you gain strengthened, protect, and hastened. If they already have any one of these blessings, their next attack gains the lightning mantra.
Okay. So first, you can change the weather if you want. I assume
hold
that
on.
probably.
Keep talking. I'll be back in 1 second.
Okay. So you can change the weather if you want. It says change the weather to raining if you want. That's one half. I assume that changing the weather during battle can be advantageous depending on either your makeup or your party makeup. Because remember that from a few episodes ago, Gubat-Banwa can be played by just like one person by themselves if they want to. It'd be a little harder than most, I'm sure. But it can also be played with very, very, very small groups.
Still attached to my Bluetooth. Sorry about that.
It's okay, Monk. We can barely hear you.
Down there in a minute.
But the there's also the larger way to play where everybody passes around what's essentially the GM stick. And then there's a way to play where you have a dedicated GM. We described all those when we first started talking about Gubat-Banwa a couple weeks ago. But I assume changing the weather to raining will give advantage to something. Maybe water-based attacks, or maybe if the lightning mantra is a thing, maybe during raining it does more damage or something. Who knows? We haven't gotten into the violence chapter itself yet to see whether what would occur in this case, what would happen, and because of that, I am spitballing and speculating as to why you'd want to change the weather. But not changing the weather makes it so that everybody's floating, and I assume float is probably what it says on the tin. Not quite flight, but probably stops you from shallow water, or which was mentioned earlier, shallow water or difficult terrain. Probably at least reduces your terrain penalties. And then, of course, the stance itself. Oh yeah, all these people get this stuff, but if they already have some of that stuff, they get the lightning mantra as well. It's like, this is one of those buffs where you're like, is this too much? And then you're like, nah, this is a game about people basically becoming demigods and killing each other and everybody else. Lots of violence. Lots of violence. We like violence in this household. But, yeah, it's a... So far, what we've seen from the Warrior Bullion is it says it's a medium, and it is. It has its own spirit that it revs up with and does stuff with. And of course, all these nice buffing and healing stances and things that they can do. But why is half their kit Planet's Protection? Why are they part Eris?
And I am back.
Welcome back, Monk. I filibustered, as usual.
Thank you for that.
I was just commenting though. That third technique there says you can change the weather to raining if you want to. I assume that there would be tactical reasons to change it to raining that you might actually consider.
Yeah, especially since with rain comes mud.
Well, it just reminds me of the fact that during rainstorms in certain Pokemon games, certain attacks become 100% accuracy. One of those being thunder.
But did you read off the fourth technique?
No, I was leaving that to you.
Yep.
I was filibustering the entire time.
Mm-hmm. So the fourth technique is gleaming.
Tribuwana Tara Dewi dance.
Mm-hmm. And this also has the effect of gleam, which we'll likely get into
during violence.
Mm-hmm. I know we say that a lot, but it is what it is. Target is all enemies in burst 2. Area attack is D8 plus spirit versus resilience. Effect is take on the stance until the start of your next riff. And the stance effect is you and all allies in burst 2 gain unavoidable and merit on all their non-area attacks.
That's going to help some of your raiders for sure.
So So the medium is the closest thing to the healer in this, but those expecting to just stand back and heal like a lot of games, this is not that kind of setup.
Monk. They can change the weather and give people merit and temporary glory and strength. They're definitely a support class for sure. But they also have that little spirit that does shit for them too.
Mm-hmm. If I were to compare them to anything, especially since I've been doing a lot of 4th edition comparison, I would bring up the Shaman that was in Player's Handbook 2. The Shaman had a companion spirit which could move around which you could move around on its own, and could also act as the focal point for certain spells instead of the shaman itself. So the best way to play them was by using them as a as basically a magic turret, not in the shooting thing sense, but in the controlling the area kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Which I did say that the medium is somewhat of a leader, but something that a lot of people conveniently forget about most of the classes in 4E when they say, they're too restrictive or something like that, is each of them, even with the 4-role setup, they will dip into other roles somewhat. It became common practice to have a primary and secondary role with how people had built their characters. The fighter is ostensibly a defender, but does dip a little bit into striker. Just as one example. And this one is you have a fair bit of it with that setup. I can see why this one would be very complex, because the use of the Donation means that the best way to get the most out of this setup is by understanding positioning. Mm-hmm. Not positioning in the posture sense, but rather making sure that your companion is in a good spot to take advantage of area of effect. Because, well, a lot of the effects do focus on that, and having them nearby allies is certainly going to help. Something that I will always appreciate when it comes to games that people complain are too combat focused is, in those setups, even the healer has some means of doing things in a more active sense.
Mm-hmm.
Something I don't miss from 90s and some 2000s games was that idea of the heal bot. The person who just sits back and does nothing but heal. If I'm being honest, it's part of the reason why I don't like playing any healer job in FF14.
I mean, they're not really heal bots. They never were. It's just people played them that way.
People play them that way, and I cannot play that kind of passive. I cannot play that kind of I'm waiting for someone else to do things or have something happen to them. In fact, when I played the brief time I played White Mage, I felt like I was staring more at the HP bars of my allies than actually paying attention to what was happening in the instance.
Mm-hmm.
And but then again, I recall how people who just expected the fairy to do all the work ended up reeing when they couldn't do that anymore. So maybe I'm just weird. But obviously there's a lot of terms that we're going to be further exploring once we get into violence. But even with that, you have even if you had one character from each discipline here, you've still got a decent spread.
You do. I imagine that as we go on further, we'll see some more complexity.
Hmm. I do see that one of the disciplines down the road is Sword Saint, so that's one I'm gonna have to going to have some fun with.
I'm wondering if it'll be a sword saint anywhere near what we think it is. Probably not.
Probably not. And, although I can't help, I did look ahead at the Star Shooter, which we'll get to in a few weeks, and gee, I wonder where the idea for that one came from.
I wonder.
I mean, I'm not casting any judgments. I'm riffing here, but
Of course.
when it comes to the disciplines, we have a very good setup, I would say.
Thus far, what we've seen, while not even going, we haven't even seen, for example, a witch or a sharpshooter.
Mm-hmm.
These were all melee-based classes for the most part, and are also, most of them were described as sentinels, meaning, their primary thing is to take heat, which we saw in all three of the sentinels. They all have ways to taunt and take heat. Some of them are just more geared towards taking heat and killing you at the same time. There's this. This would remind me of like a party with a damage tank, a tank, a DPS, and for lack of a better term, a healer. Though there isn't it's not just a healer, like I'm saying. But that spread alone is an interesting one. I could see it working in, say, like group combat against armies.
Mm-hmm.
I can see it working against armies for sure. I kind of want to see how the sharpshooters work, because we know that there's technically a zoning system in this game. So,
Mm-hmm. And I know some will look at that and say that it's too combat focused, but this is a war drama that's all about violence. If you're I always, maybe it's just me, but I always find the criticism of a given TTRPG, especially a fantasy one, being too focused on combat to be silly. And I think the reason why I find it silly is it often comes from people who don't seem to fully grasp what they're asking for, if they even know what they're asking for, because they talk about not wanting more role-playing mechanics when those are the same crowd that think that they're actors.
mm-hmm.
And forgetting the fact that this is still a game. Yes, I'm aware that there are TTRPGs that put less emphasis on their combat. At the same time, though, if I've seen just as many cases of people putting in quote unquote role playing mechanics that ultimately don't get used because they're far too situational.
Yeah. Not to mention, there was the skills system that does allow a Kadunganon to interact with the world in ways other than violence.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very clear that the primary focus of this is, well, violence, because the inspiration is I guess what you could call the warring states period of the Southeast Asia. Like, all the little Rajanates and other kingdoms that happened in Southeast Asia during history. There was a bunch of them there. A metric fuck ton of tribal wars and differing kingdoms all fighting for supremacy and control of trade routes specifically. Just remember that the Tamil kings were in Southeast Asia at one point, and they controlled trade for like 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
So to be like, oh, there's too much combat in this game that is inspired by historical war-torn eras of Southeast Asia.
I was reading somebody's review of the FF14 TRPG, and they were remarking about it being too combat focused, like 4E, and apparently using the 4E part as a pejorative. But and I'm like, this is emulating an MMO where combat is going to be a major factor.
This is emulating an MMO where the most engaging portion of the MMO is fighting things to advance the story.
Also,
sure, there's crafting and housing and gathering. Those are all things that are secondary to let's go follow MSQs. Oh, a dungeon. Oh, a trial. Oh, a raid.
I think they forget that it was a start. They forgot it was a starter set. But I wanted to highlight that some of the discourse involving combat mechanics has made me cringe for the longest time, especially games that think that they're special because of the fact that they don't emphasize combat.
Like, if you want a game that is not, if you want to make a game that is not combat focused, all fine and dandy. Or if you want to make a game that you want to be more multifaceted, so that there are things you can do that are combat and things that you can do that are non-combat, and you kind of want to make them equal. Would you say Sake would be more like that? It's more rounded and multifaceted.
Sake can certainly be that, but because of the fact that character creation in that is so freeform, it's a kitchen sink.
Yeah, so the point I'm trying to make is, if you want to make your game a game where you do lots of things, go ahead.
Yeah.
Especially if you can do it well.
But
if you want to make your game hyper focused on ultraviolence, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. But with that said, that's going to do it for this particular episode of The Valley. We will be we will be back next week covering the disciplines of the Confederation.
No, we won't, because 1 and 3, Monk.
All right. 1 and 3. So that's in 2 weeks. Next week we will be looking at the second edition of Dot Dungeon. And if you're thinking that sounds like it's going to be a dot hack like game. Yeah, kinda.
I mean, you're not wrong, but you're not necessarily right.
I would recommend people look up the term lit RPG. But like I said, that's going to do it for this week. I will be returning to Sword World tomorrow, and there's a few other surprises, including one that is going to be very shortly. So keep an eye out for that. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.